I'm happy to spend the next 45 minutes or so talking to you about the realm of library systems and the companies and the products and services that are involved in that. It's kind of been my life's work for the last couple of decades to follow all of this and to chronicle it for the broader library community. So that's what I want to do. This is kind of my core area of interest and expertise. This is just what's in the program. So, as was said, I created this Library Technology Guides website, which is kind of my repository of information that supports my research and makes available information to the broader community. All of my kind of articles, news stories, reports, database of libraries, kind of all of that kind of information is available there. So before I kind of get started talking about the topic at hand, the Library Systems Report that's due to come out in May, so I try to kind of use various ways to triangulate what's going on in the library technology industry. The Library Systems Report is an industry report that I do based on multiple sources, but the major one is kind of data that the library vendors provide to me. They give me statistics, they give me lists of new clients, lots of kind of good and helpful information. So that's good. I also have a database of libraries that I keep track of all the different, when a library contracts for a new system, ILS and discovery and all of that is recorded in my database. And then I do the perceptions report. We're actually doing a session on that this afternoon where I ask libraries about how they like their current systems, how the vendor's performing and that kind of thing. Goes out pretty broadly, get 3,000 or 4,000 responses every year, and then that also returns a lot of information. Oh, by the way, I changed systems. We're thinking of changing systems and all of that. So I think it's important to kind of have all of these kind of different sources and processes, I guess, that kind of provide check and balances so that, I think I have a pretty good understanding of what's going on in the world of library systems. Because no one of those, I think, is enough. So mostly what I want to talk about today is this Library Technology Industry Report that I've been doing for a while. In 2002, I began doing this for Library Journal. Library Journal has, even long before me, kind of done a automation marketplace report that covers what happened in the calendar year before that. So in 2002, they asked me to do that, and I did it for them through 2013. And following the same more or less methodology throughout the time I did that. There was a survey that I constructed. This is the data that I want from each vendor, how you count sales and the total number of sales, how many are new clients, kind of specific information that I'm looking for. How many folks work for your company, how many are in development and all that. So that kind of gave me data over time regarding the companies in play at any given point. And then in 2013, we kind of agreed that that they wanted to do another approach to tracking technology. American Libraries was interested in kind of taking over the report mostly in the way I've been doing it. So all that data and that methodology followed me. So in a way, this is a pretty consistent set of reports over how many years is this? I can't count that high, 17, using the same kind of data and survey instruments and all of that from the vendor perspective. So, this has been, I think an important platform that I've been privileged to have in order to be able to gather information about the products and the services related to kind of strategic products that libraries invest in, and then to be able to reflect that back to the broader library audience. So, it's been it's a privilege that I take pretty seriously. That we're not a large enough industry that folks like Gartner would do a library industry write-up and do their Magic Quadrant and all of that. We're just too small. We're a microscopic industry compared to healthcare and insurance and kind of the other business sectors that they do cover. I did an exercise one time that said, well, the total value of the revenue in library technology at the time, and it was about 3-4 years ago, I estimated to be about $1.3 billion. Sounds like a lot of money to us. Globally, the spend of libraries and those kind of technology systems, is significant, but still small compared to the global economy and other business sectors. But for us, it's a lot of money. So therefore, I think it's important to help libraries make those investments in technology products with as much information as is available. For a lot of public and academic and school and corporate libraries, it may represent 2 or 3% of your budget. And maybe every few years, a very large capital expenditure to get a new system. So, it's important, I think, for libraries to make these kind of decisions with open eyes, kind of understanding the products and the services and vendors that comprise the industry, kind of the candidates to choose from. And it's uncomfortably narrow these days through the consolidation and so forth that's happened over the course of the years. You can see by the little taglines that never really do justice to what the report is about, kind of the different themes of the industry that have taken place over the time that I've been covering it, and especially in recent ones where, there are kind of big things going on in regard to reshaping the industry and the way that new products are emerging out of kind of reimagined companies, you might say. The latest one, 2019, you can't see yet because it's coming out in the March, April, May issue of American Libraries. It's done. I have it turned in, and I think they're finishing the production process. But this is a preview of that, So, it will be published both online and the printed issue of American Libraries in a couple of months. So, you're the first ones to see some of the information that's coming out of this. I hope you'll still look at the report when it comes out. So let's go back a couple of years, kind of build some context leading up to the more recent version of it in 2017. And so the years are complicated. Just what year do you call this? So when I gather information from the vendors, I'm asking them to give data that describes their activity for the previous calendar year. From January through December of 2016 would go into the 2017 report. Keep in mind that the year published is a little bit after the year that the data represents, and then some of the activities bleed in the next year too. I mean, I'm usually writing it in February, March timeframe, so things that happen in that timeframe are important to go into the report too. But the statistics are from the previous calendar year. So in 2017, a lot of things were starting to come together by then. A lot of kind of important mergers and acquisitions, kind of continuing what's been going on for a long time, but also in kind of a different way. So let me go to the next slide that says a little bit more about that, is that throughout the time that I've been covering the library technology industry, there's been this what I characterize as horizontal consolidation, where competitors are buying each other. Maybe some of you have seen the funky little graph that I have on my website that shows the mergers and acquisitions of the industry over time. It shows kind of going back into the 1970s, a lot of the companies that aren't familiar to us now are kind of merged inside of some of the companies that we do know. Circe Dynix, for example, probably has the remnants depending on how you count, at least 20 companies that at one time existed in the library automation industry. Innovative's made a few mergers and acquisitions, VTLS and Polaris most notably. Biblioteca, an RFID company, has kind of made acquisitions globally to become kind of the dominant player in that niche of things. And in the special library market, Lucidia has essentially bought up most of the competitors. And so that's been the nature of things, just consolidation of different competitors kind of merging into a new company. And is that a good or a bad thing? I would say it's both. It's concerning to libraries when there are a fewer number of choices. But it's also the case that a fragmented industry, in a way, can't really support innovation. That when you have, what I define as a fragmented industry, when you have a large number of companies competing in a limited economy with undifferentiated products, all of them are just kind of scrapping it out for each other's customers, and none of them have the development capacity to create kind of new kinds and different products. So I would say during most of the history of the library automation industry, libraries were choosing from brand A, B, C, or D of an ILS that all have circulation, acquisition, serials, and catalog. There wasn't any philosophical, kind of conceptual differences in the way that library automation has taken place during most of the history of the industry. It was a time, and I think the time is different now, where libraries were a lot alike across the different types. Public and academic and school libraries during the era of print were mostly about acquiring, describing, circulating, and providing tools to discover books. We don't live in that time now. That academic libraries have seen fundamental shifts so that they spend, 85 to 95% or more of their budgets on subscriptions to electronic resources. So the machinery that you need in order to automate a library is substantially different than the times before. That leads a little bit into the other reshaping of the industry that's happened in addition to the horizontal consolidation, which is what I characterize as vertical consolidation, where large top-level library services company, not library tech companies, but kind of top-level companies like ProQuest, for example, and Follett, are acquiring companies with interesting products and services, often of which is a technology product or service, like an ILS. The classic example of that is ProQuest buying Ex Libris. So you take one of the major content providers servicing academic libraries and other types of libraries too, acquiring the leader in the technology side of things to create a company that has a new and interesting shape. Much more technology focused and with interesting synergies, hopefully not too direct, between the content that a library might buy and the technology tools. So that's something to think about. At what level do technology and content services interact with each other? Could they, should they, or even do they? So, interesting questions that come into play with this vertical consolidation. You see EBSCO getting involved in the mix. They are making acquisitions all the time of content companies, and the most recent one just a few months ago was their acquisition of Stax, involvement with Folio, involvement with almost every integrated library system for development of integrations with EBSCO Discovery Service. Follett, we, very much a player in the K-12 library technology realm, but they're a, $2.5 billion company, and then they bought Baker and Taylor, another $1 billion. So they're like a $3.6 billion company in the industry doing a lot of different things. A lot of your college bookstores are run by them. They have 85, I think, % of the library automation in U.S. public schools. So a big deal, kind of, if you look at public and academic libraries, you say, Follett, who are they, but, they're a big deal. More dominant within their sector than any other company has been in any other sector, I would probably say. So the next year, the 2018 report, it kind of talks about how this new, these new companies that are put together are reflecting kind of particular visions of automation and technology for the respective sectors that they're involved with. So that's interesting and important to pay attention to, I think. Again, keep in mind that we're kind of away from this view of library technology systems of buying brand A, B, or C of the same thing. There are some pretty different choices available and at stake now. So some of the highlights of the 2018 report is that we're coming to a point where both resource management and discovery services are relatively mature. And that includes what some of us might think of the new ones like Alma. It's been on the market almost a decade. So, it's important to realize that, we're in a certain cycle of things. I'll talk about that in a minute. But these, machines, these systems that seem recent really aren't as recent as we might think. The genre of index-based discovery, things like EBSCO Discovery Service, Primo with Primo Central, Summon, and WorldCat Discovery Service, that was launched in 2009. So, again, these are kind of mature product categories, and I'm not sure mature is always a positive. It has both positive and negative aspects to it. So in a way, we're at a point where the routine automation isn't a done deal, but it's mature. What do you do next? Is the most important thing that you do in your library how to check out books anymore, or even how to manage electronic resources? There are tools to go out and to buy to do that, but there are lots of other unmet needs strategically in public and academic and school libraries. What are they? I think we're at a time where kind of that's the focus. There's nothing sexy about buying an integrated library system. It's just routine business process automation systems. How are we meeting other kinds of needs like supporting academic libraries, supporting universities in furthering their research agenda and providing better support for the curriculum, to reducing costs for the university and copyright and so forth for articles used in classes. That's kind of the new ground that I think that some of the companies and libraries are interested in exploring. Next, so what's, good stuff happening now, what's next? And I think that's a bit of it. Resource sharing, I think, is a fundamental aspect of library automation these days. More examples in the academic sector than the public sector right now of kind of new projects oriented toward shared infrastructure, but that is kind of the emerging tsunami of change in the academic space, are kind of very large deals of many libraries collaborating to share a system. So other things are falling out. So you look at two of the big names in the library content and now technology space, you see interesting parallels where this is just showing a couple of columns, but it's really a more complex matrix of each of these companies exploring new ways in order to provide services to libraries that both help the libraries and help them kind of monetize new products. I mean, they're interested in growth. They want to develop new things that libraries are interested in investing in because library space is saturated. How many of you don't already have an ILS? How many don't have a discovery system? There's like 100% close to that penetration of most of the strategic products. So that leaves room, I think, to start for the companies and for libraries in turn to think about ways that they can use technology to meet other kinds of previously unmet needs in their organizations and the parent organizations. So you see a lot of parallels. They both have a major content delivery platform. ProQuest One is kind of the big deal at ProQuest now and EBSCO They both have acquisitions platform, Oasis versus Gobi. They both have resource management strategies, with ProQuest being more with Alma and EBSCO's being more on the open source Folio project. And so forth. So just one parallel after another, but though with significant difference. It's not like a Me Too kind of thing quite, but both of them, it appears, are of similar profile and are engaging in parallel strategies in ways that they want to explore the market. That year was a year, and Ex Libris started launching a few new programs that kind of fit that pattern. With Alma, with from 8 years of development and deployment, had 1,000 libraries running it. It's time. It's a mature state. Let's start building on this platform that we've developed to support other types of technology products that can take advantage of that underlying infrastructure to address new things. So a couple of things that have come out of that is Leganto as a course management, list management system, and Exploro, a new product in development now that will help libraries meet the research agenda. So finally to this here, cycles of innovation. So I'm thinking about how new products come out, how they get kind of tested in the market, the winners move on, the losers don't, and how it's this cycle of, a couple of years of kind of initial development, usually in partnership with libraries, maybe a few early sales. If it catches on, if it gets traction, then that leads into a sales cycle, an ongoing enhancement cycle. And my observation is that's about a decade and a half. When you look at the history of library automation, when a new slate of products come out, and previous examples would be the change from the mainframe to the client-server systems, that's about a 15-year deal to kind of make a fundamental transition in the library, in libraries from one kind of technology to another. And so I think that's what we're seeing now, and that's playing out especially in the academic libraries with a not quite, but almost wholesale transition from legacy integrated library systems to new generation of library services platform. And I caught myself saying that new generation when my point is that it's not by now. It's a current mature product. And then public libraries are seeing a wholly different kind of innovation cycle. I would even posit to say it's not that much of an innovation cycle right now because mostly public libraries are continuing to buy integrated library systems that look a lot like the systems they had before. And I'll talk later about, they're trying to do better web-based interfaces and that kind of thing. And they're also kind of enhancing their back-end system with other kind of customer-facing, patron-facing environments, better discovery environments, web portal environments, other kinds of scheduling and other kinds of tools that kind of build out the functionality that a public library needs, but the back end really isn't changing that much. And I'm not necessarily saying that it should, because for public libraries, unlike academics, the main course is circulation of print books, supplemented by an increasing portion of ebooks, but they don't make their living in the same way that academic libraries do in subscriptions to electronic resources. A typical large public library system, as you know, may subscribe to a handful of databases, but it's a small part usually of their overall collection budget. So again, the shape of the collection kind of drives a different approach to overall automation, and it happens to be one where the ILS can actually succeed a bit more. So I continue to see that. And the same thing with schools. In more and more electronic content, but they still deal with a lot of print books in school libraries, and the dominant systems continue to have more or less the shape of functionality of an integrated library system. But again, supplemented by a variety of kind of teacher and student-facing tools and content ecosystems that have to do with the curriculum and so forth. So what this show you a little bit of statistics that will be in the report. This is just kind of some of the integrated library system statistics, just kind of show you the kinds of data that I collect. But you can see out of this that, by far the biggest sales event last year was Alma, 115 contracts spanning 448 libraries. And what's a contract? A contract is like all of the community colleges in California. So, these are big deals. A lot of them are. So the amount of kind of economic value represented in kind of that 1 year of sales is pretty phenomenal and representative of this more sweeping change that's happening in the academic library space. After that, you see companies like Symphony had a good year. Cersei Dynix did 117 contracts, and then WorldShare kind of holding its own with kind of 53 new contracts that they reported. So these are the kind of things that I pay a lot of attention to. I have other charts in my website where you can kind of look at year over time statistics for each of the given products and so forth that don't show up in the report itself. Because this report is printed in American libraries, it means that, I don't have all the space in the world. I have to be pretty selective, not only in the narrative, but in the tables that can be put there. But there's a lot of data that I also house on my website that you can explore a bit more. I care about reflecting the size of the companies that are involved. I think it's important to look at this as a measure of kind of how big they are, because we don't have any other measures. Hardly any of these reveal their revenues publicly, but you can get a sense of the relative scale of the companies involved by looking at how many people they hire. And so this year, EBSCO, they're involved in lots of different things, big company, so only a small part of this relates to their technology development, and the same thing with Follett and OCLC. These are all diverse companies, so it's a little bit harder to see what their development capacity is for the creation of the kind of products that I track. And then you look at Ex Libris, kind of a little bit more in focus, where they have 268 folks doing development of software. And Cersei Dynix isn't shabby either. But what I want to say is that this is the benefit of consolidation. That it takes very large teams of programmers and development folks, not programmers. Programmers are some of those is the least of it. But kind of architects and design, quality assurance, and kind of all the different pieces of a development cycle that are needed to produce new products for libraries. I think that it takes a certain level of capacity in order to get away from kind of Me Too ILS kind of development to let's think about fundamental new systems that libraries might need in order to meet their needs today. It takes a certain amount of capacity, I would say gumption, to say, okay, we're going to build a new system from scratch with a different code base than what our previous systems have been based on. So I think, because it's really hard to re-engineer an existing integrated library system to be something entirely new. You don't go from server-bound computing to multi-tenant architecture very easily. In fact, it's easier to start over, I think, is my observation. You don't go from kind of hardwired circulation logic built around MARC records to more flexible systems with that support multiple types of metadata structure and business rules that can span print, digital, electronic, and holograms, or whatever it is that libraries have in their collections. So it takes kind of a new stab at it, I think, sometimes in order to end up with new kind of systems to meet fundamental change that's happened in libraries, I think. All of that just to talk about how many people work for a company. So there's more resources on my website. There's this one report that I conjured up that says, okay, let's take all the given reported sales and let's do some math on them. Let's figure out kind of how big the library is and how many how big their collection is and how many branches they have and all of that to kind of build a more weighted view of the economic value of the sales. So that's kind of what I've done. It's a weighted annual sales report, and you can do it over time to kind of see, because you just count libraries, you don't get very far. For example, Biblionics is a great company. They have like 600 or 700 or 800 customers now, but they're all small public libraries. They're all paying a small amount. The whole value of the company is less than one of Ex Libris's typical contracts. So counting libraries as a measure of the movement of the library technology industry, is a pretty dull tool. So again, I keep trying to find kind of sharper instruments to be able to describe the overall industry. And it's things like that I think help a little bit. Let's get some weightings and some heft to the different measures. So we're in an industry kind of dominated by giants, but that's not the only show in town. The mid-size and the niche players really play an important role. The mid-size ILS companies continue to be very strong and have good sales and provide excellent support to their clients. The focus on being an ILS company, is a good thing. That this is what they do for a living, as I often say. Whereas when you look at the larger companies, it's one of the things they do for a living. And then it's important to have the niche players. There's this great little company called Keystone. They have this class automation system that is sold to libraries who serve people with visual disabilities. So, a big company is never going to take the time to do that. You need smaller companies with a small focus that, do these kind of boutique services that, a billion-dollar company isn't going to find worth their while. So I think it's important to kind of recognize and support those that fill in these gaps in the industry because, there are still too many gaps. I don't even know if I have a slide for it, but one of my rants is that, there are still so many unautomated public libraries here in the U.S. None of the products scale down to the budgets that, a very small library has. So I find it painful when I look at statistics of how many under-automated or unautomated libraries there are here. When I go to India, I expect to see that. But to see it here in our home court is a little bit more troubling to me. So I think I've talked to, so what happened last year as far as business transitions? It wasn't a huge year. It wasn't a big kind of shakeout like we saw a few years ago, but kind of incremental additions to companies that build on existing business strategies. We talked about Ex Libris moving more into the research services support. Well, they bought a company that helps them with that. Research is a interesting UK firm that does research and produces some products and databases related to funding opportunities for research institutions in UK and the rest of Europe. Kind of reflects the need that Ex Libris has as they globalize their research agenda. They made a few changes in the way they do Latin America, no big deal, mostly organizational change. EBSCO kind of, again, working on the front end here. They acquired Stacks, this company that has productized a kind of public, a library website CMS product. Kind of interesting. Some libraries have taken it on, but EBSCO kind of invested in helping the company produce it, and then was exclusive distributor, and now they own it. So kind of increasing level of involvement there. Axial made another acquisition. Axial doesn't do a lot of business here in libraries in the U.S. Company that I follow pretty closely, but they're not a big name that most of you probably already know about, but they're a big deal. They're like the fourth, maybe fifth biggest company in the library technology industry, and have made some new acquisitions and interesting new products that we'll talk about later. And the mergers and acquisitions doesn't apply just to the for-profit companies. We're also seeing a time of consolidation in the nonprofit sector. Examples include NISO acquiring, that doesn't sound as good of a word in the nonprofit sector, so I said Enphase merged into NISO. But anytime they say there's a merger, it's always an acquisition. There's somebody who ends up on top, and the other organization gets folded in. So that's what happened with NISO. They agree, they have a lot of common areas of involvement, and it made sense to combine. You save a lot of administrative costs and infrastructure, and there's a lot of the same kinds of reasons in the for-profit arena to consolidate apply in the nonprofit. And then Lyrasis, DuraSpace went into Lyrasis, again expanding their involvement with a variety of different open source platforms. A lot of funding from the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation to build Lyrasis capacity for open source support, and that continues as they continue the stewardship of these other products. So one of the questions I get asked a lot is all of this moving toward monopoly? I don't think so. I think that we will continue to see, we are seeing dominance in at least some of the sectors where one strong player is doing the most business, doing the most development, and getting the most customers, but none of them have gone unchallenged. Ex Libris is dominant in the academic sector, but OCLC gives them a run for their money with WMS, so it's not a clean sweep. And open source and continues to be a factor in academics. Look at Virginia Tech doing a deal with Bywater Solutions to do COA, Coral, and in partnership with EBSCO for EDS. So a different approach by a big ARL library. So that's interesting to me. I want to see kind of every possible approach to library automation, so we can see how well all of that works, and then the future. Interest in Folio. Like in the next few months, I think we'll start seeing libraries using Folio in production. So we're kind of on the cusp of that change. Makes it hard to write about when I do the library systems report because I talk about systems sold and installed. Well, they're not any of those yet, but I think it will be a different story next year. Even in the K-12 arena, where Follett is more dominant in that sector, I said, than we've ever seen, they still have a lot of competitors. But I think the nearest competitor is a fifth the size. Last time I kind of did the analysis, Alexandria had about a fifth of the business that Follett had. Book Systems and some others, Opals especially, continue to be vibrant systems in the school library arena. In the corporate law, healthcare arena, Lucidia has bought a lot of the competition, but Sutron, relatively new company, is doing very well too. So again, in any of the sectors, no one company can be at all considered a monopoly, but they're dominant. And then in the public library, it's more scattershot. A lot of different ILS products are dividing the market. So that also kind of sets us up to talk about the migration trends, whereas in the academic library, there's something to do right now. If you're running an integrated library system that's oriented to print and you're managing your electronic resources on a spreadsheet, there's a solution that's designed to help you, that is, mature and seeing a lot of acceptance in the market. So, that is driving kind of these large numbers of sales that we looked at a second ago, movement toward ALMA and world share. So there's kind of something to do. There's reason for the market to move. Whereas I look at the public library sector, well, not so much. There's some kind of trade-offs, where, a library running an innovative product will buy a Circe Dynix product, and there's some of the other way around too. So there's no compelling, overarching motion of change for that sector in play right now. It's kind of the devil we're not totally happy with our current ILS, and we know it has its flaws, but we know the other system will have flaws too. So why spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on a mostly lateral move that's not going to really change the nature of your library? Why not spend some of that money on kind of other products and services that build on the back end that you have in order that you can provide more compelling and enriching and engaging services for your customers? So I see a lot of that, just not a lot of movement in the public library space right now, but kind of hang on. Maybe there will be a sweep of change in the future. OCLC is positioning its WISE system, a system that it acquired I think in 2013 from this company called HKA. I can't say its full name in Dutch, but they had this BICAT WISE system that's been around for a while that now they're remarketing it to the U.S. How could it already be 5 minutes to time? I want to skip a little bit because I do want to leave some time here. If you've ever heard me talk, I talked a lot about library services platforms as the new system for academic libraries. And the principle, the concept of shared infrastructure is really gaining ground in academic libraries. A year or two ago, I built this slide of kind of all of these major projects where libraries that were previously automated in a different way have gone toward a shared system. There's more of that this year. Where, all of the California community colleges, most of which were on different automation systems, all of the academic libraries in South Carolina, most of which were on different automation systems, just one example of another of kind of very large shared infrastructure projects where libraries want to be able to increase the impact of their collection by collaborating with their peers. It's just kind of in the DNA of libraries, I think, to want to collaborate. It kind of works against the grain also of each library thinking they're their own special snowflake and want to do things in their own way. That, I think, is the biggest barrier to collaboration, and I think that libraries are understanding that and are willing to make compromises in details of operation and metadata management in order to gain the benefits of collaboration. So I'm not going to do anything but slide through these slides. They're available on my website already. Just go to Library Technology Guides, Documents, and Presentations. You can grab it. But mostly what I want to do, I had a lot of slides left, is stop for questions. I didn't talk about open source. Maybe you'll ask about that. There's just so much to talk about. So now I think I do want to stop and ask and respond to some questions. And I can't see anything because of this blinding light.
Questions? Come on. Right here.
I just want to bite on the open source thread you left there. What do you see happening in the open source world that you are excited about?
Well, I'm excited about everything. I I get excited about the proprietary systems. I get excited about the open source systems. You know, I'm fully enthusiastic about all the different approaches to buying and deploying software. But on open source, you know, it's a routine part of the library technology industry now. In the U.S., open source mostly happens in support of commercial firms that provide kind of soup to nuts services. They'll do migration, hosting, training, and help desk. So you require no less internal expertise to do an open source system than you do a proprietary system, but there's a different type of community and approach to it that I think resonates with libraries. So as of now, I think 14%, I think, of public libraries in the U.S. are using an open source automation system. Is it 4 or 6%? But something like that of academic libraries are using open source automation systems. So it's standard in the industry, and some libraries like one approach and some like the other. So today, you know, it's fair to say that in the U.S., proprietary software is used more than open source. Open source is growing a bit, is gradual increase. When open source started being a viable option in the U.S. beginning about 2008 or 9, I was interested to see, well, is it going to be gradual, or is it going to be like a hockey stick? Is it going to change the world? Well, it's been more gradual. But the libraries running open source, and I'll talk some about this in the afternoon, I think, are equally happy and sometimes more happy with their automation environment than those using proprietary systems. And the other thing to say is the Folio project. You know, that's what the academic library space is kind of keeping an eye on now to see if it lives up to this ambitious set of promises that have been given regarding its flexibility and its architecture and the kinds of things that that particular open source platform is going to do for academic libraries. So we'll see. There's no there's no product there to analyze as it's used in libraries yet. So I hope that touches some of the things that you were interested in.
We're out of time, so let's thank Marshall.
Okay. Thank you.